Welcome to the Near Memo, a weekly conversation about search, social, and commerce. What happened, why it matters, and the implications for local. Okay, here we are, episode 71 of the Near Memo, where we talk about the week's events in search, social, and commerce through a local lens. David Mim is on vacation, and we're very, very excited to have the illustrious Cindy Crum sitting in for him, adding her perspective to our own. As always, Mike Blumenthal is here with his opinions. Mike Blumenthal and his opinions. No. Anyway, so we're there's just been a lot of stuff, as always. I feel like I'm a broken record. I say this all the time, but this has been very momentous period of time with the Supreme Court ruling in Roe v. Wade and other things that are going on in addition to all the normal stuff that's happening in the digital world. And I'll be talking about data privacy. But first, we want to go to Mike, who's going to talk about entities and Google's formulation of the messy middle, and a pretty interesting article that happened this week around how to reorient, how SEOs should really think about these items. And Cindy will be talking about deal search and Google's larger objectives. And then we'll get to me and data privacy. So, Mike, why don't you take it away?
Sure. So this was an article by Gianluca Fiorelli from I Love SEO, and it was based on a talk he gave in Europe several weeks back. And I just thought that it really encapsulates, one, how local has functioned for the last 8 years, 10 years, but also how SEOs need to be functioning in a world of artificial intelligence, entity-based search. The title of the article is Oh My Mum, or How to Think SEO in the Era of Algorithms Based on AI. He points out that Think with Google often provides tells about how Google is actually functioning. And they write these articles for their primary audience. And an article that we talked about extensively, I think it was a year ago, or maybe it's 2 years ago now, was the article in which they talked about the study where they talked about how the messy middle was the name of it.
It was an article about reframing the customer journey and how to think about the customer journey.
Exactly. And how people, once they got triggered, moved into this really sort of infinite loop between exploration and evaluation. And that messy middle has largely replaced the traditional funnel. And Gianluca's point is that Google is now, instead of sending people away from the site to deal with that messiness where people move between exploration and evaluation, they have positioned their knowledge graph to allow people to move back and forth between the various exploration and evaluation states they may be in using entities. And that it is the core now of Google search, and all the various algorithm updates from MUM and all the others are dealing with this problem by presenting knowledge graphs, complete knowledge graphs or narrow knowledge graphs, and ultimately guiding people through these complicated, messy middle till they make the purchase decision someplace, an e-commerce site, a product, a local business, all of which are entities. And he points out that thinking about this as zero-click search is a reflection of the behaviors of SEO of years past, where we thought about SEO as reflecting keywords and searches through keywords. And he suggests that if you think about it from an entity-first viewpoint, you can build a much more effective model. And he mentions that Google's Also Ask is largely an entity-based understanding, and it reflects that. And there's a tool that he mentions called Also Ask, which once you put a query in, will then show you the people also ask queries. And he said it's a great place to look for the questions that Google is answering to understand the entities that you need to deal with, that you then need to build a model of entity-first content that will address this. And that I love the article because it reframes SEO. It reframes this. If this is what Google is doing, you can no longer sort of keep banging on the zero-click drum. You have to accept reality and do an entity-first approach to SEO. So I thought it was a really well-done article and useful way of thinking about SEO top to bottom.
Cindy, did you want to add anything to that?
I totally agree. I think Gianluca does a good job of breaking this down and explaining it. And I think it is he's right about the future and where things are going with entities, and it fits into the larger goals that Google has with MUM and their deeper understanding of the world, but also of mobile search and no-click search, which I think there are always fewer clicks from a search result on mobile, and that's true for us as websites, but also I think it's true for Google. So even though there are now more mobile searches, people are getting the information directly from the SERP. So SEO has to adjust and not be a keyword play, but be more of a regular marketing and awareness and everything else play.
Yeah, I mean, and we're seeing sort of related to that, we're seeing just the SERP become this kind of cornucopia of images and different kinds of information. I mean, it's almost to the point of kind of I referenced in a tweet the other day that we have to sort of Marie Kondo the SERP, because I mean, I think Barry pointed out that we're now seeing these sort of 16. Barry Schwartz pointed out that we're seeing these 16 image blocks for product search. You know, it's really dramatically different than when all of this started. And at the GML, Jerry Dishler talked about it becoming a I forget the metaphor he used, but it was just they were emphasizing more and more and more visual information, especially in the mobile SERP. So,
and this visual information is something that Google understands at an entity level, parses at an entity level, and then categorizes at any level. And Gianluca pointed out that you can use the image categorization as one of the other clues as to how Google, like if you do a search, for example, for engagement rings, you'll see at the top the image categorizations of men's, women's, gold, diamond. And so you can use images as another way to understand how Google is organizing this information.
So we don't usually ask for sort of quote unquote actionable advice at the end of these segments, but because this is really a kind of fundamental shift in thinking, what would you guys say are the things that SEO should be doing beyond sort of conceptual reorientation to entity search?
Well, first is if you're dealing with products, he points out in the article, and I agree that you have to have your product feed down pat, automatic, really clean so that Google can understand it, because Google is not only going up in the entity search, they're going way down, way granular, and you need to be there. Likewise, you need to be there with entity-based images. I think at the SEO strategy level, you need to be doing, instead of doing keyword research, you need to be doing entity research and then building pages around the entities to fulfill the need of these different levels of query. And then the final thing he pointed out, which I agree with, is barnacle SEO, where if you can't show up in that SERP, attach yourself to somebody who can. Cindy, probably have plenty of other ideas.
Agree on that, and I think building out the entity, including the product feed, is a really good way to start. But even if you don't have a product feed, knowing that Google may be processing the images that are associated with your business profile to understand better what you do or what services you offer, and knowing that Q&A may also be something that Google is looking at to understand.
What is that one? Q&A?
Or any kind of responses and reviews or questions that are associated with the business profile could be something that Google's using to learn about your business, and also just thinking about the business profiles as kind of a direct feed for you to be able to give Google the information that you want them to know. Whereas in SEO on regular websites, we're just kind of hoping a lot of the time that Google finds what we think is important. In GMB, you have a much more direct way of giving them and feeding them your content and being active with products and posts and communication with your customers directly there.
Okay, great. That's excellent. So, and there is the idea that some of this could be disrupted if any of these antitrust regulations make their way through to law, but that's a question for another another discussion. So
Thanks for joining David, Mike, and Greg. To stay on top of the latest developments in local, subscribe to our newsletter at nearmedia.co. We'll see you next week.